So this isn't directly related to any kind of building wealth or anything, but I think it's important you understand sort of how your FICO score is determined, or even like what is even a FICO score? What is it? To be honest with you, the whole idea of credit, building credit, your FICO score is really just sort of a conspiracy against you, big government, whatever you want to, big business, whatever it is. But it's really a sort of complete a grading system about you, your pay history, sort of your credit worthiness that was developed by the companies and another company kind of all getting together and deciding they needed some sort of system to sort of monitor people. You can imagine like back in the day when cities were small, like way back in the day, it was probably word of mouth and your word was your bond and all of that. But when you're talking about scale, like how does a bank really understand if you're going to be a good payer or a bad payer, how does that work? So let's just talk about it real briefly. It's not a huge component, but it is just kind of as a side important for you to understand. Very simple. The idea of a credit report and a credit score, they're actually two completely separate different things, okay? So a credit report, let's talk about that first. There's the three major brands, Equifax and Experian and TransUnion. They're all three, they all basically collect the exact same thing. At the end of the day, I just want you to think about money. It's all about money, folks. So there's these three bureaus and they get together. Basically what they do is they collect data about you. So just imagine it's like a big report about everything you've done over the past 10 years. Things after 10 years just sort of automatically drop out. So, but basically it's just a long report card, okay? So who gets reported to this thing, this credit report? Well, basically the one that everyone knows about most predominantly is lending, right? So banks, your mortgage payment, your mortgage company, your car note, credit cards, any type of that you've gone out and got a loan or you're paying somebody some type of money, they're reporting to that bureau basically saying that, yep, this person made payment, this is what the credit limit is, this is what the balance is, and they're providing all that information. The information that the credit reports, the credit bureaus collect is the information that's reported that the banks and the people that are going to use this information, we'll talk about here in a second, want to see. So they're basically reporting the information that they want to see from other people. So they're all kind of in cahoots, if you will. So banks that everyone pretty knows about, I put that in red here because it is actually, the most important one. The rest of all of these really only get reported if you do something incorrect. But these other places do check your credit. They do pull it because they're looking for, again, that credit score and that good pay history to determine if they want to do business with you. So the other one is businesses or companies. So you think about that like a cell phone company or utility. They're going to go pull your credit and they're going to check it to see, like, are you making your payments? Because if you're less likely to make payments to them, they might require some type of deposit. Think about utilities. Hey, we don't know, you're going to use water, the bill's going to be $100, you may not pay it, so I'm going to need a deposit because if you don't pay that bill, then I have something to pay for that water. So companies will protect themselves by looking at your credit to see what your pay history's been up to that point. Cell phone companies, same thing. They might not give you that new iPhone on that payment plan if they think that you're not going to pay it because maybe you take that phone and you run because you make your payment and then they're out the phone, whatever it is. So companies are going to check that. Companies don't report those payments though. So when you're paying your utilities or you're paying your cell phone, if you open up your credit report right now, you're not going to see Verizon and that you've made your payment every year for the last 10 years. It's a little bit unfair because you're making your bills. You're paying your payment on time. Look at how your FICO score is determined. We talked about pay history. You're not getting credit for that. There's some updates coming down the road that's going to give you some of that credit, but basically for the most part, you don't get credit. However, companies are still going to look at it. Now, if you don't pay your cell phone bill or you don't pay your utilities, you know what happens, right? Those companies are going to send that bill that you didn't pay to a collection agency, and that collection agency is actually going to report it to your credit. So these people will report collections to your credits, and that helps out all of these other organizations to let them know that, listen, you had a relationship with the company, you said you were going to make a payment and you didn't, and so they're letting the world know about sort of your bad debt or that you're not holding up your end of the bargain. The other one is hospitals. Now, Hospitals don't check your credit initially to do business with you. However, they will report your medical bills. So same thing, you've gone into a hospital, so they're required to treat you, but during that treatment, you're going to rack up a certain amount of, sort of a lot of debt. You're going to have a bill. If you don't pay that bill, or at least get a payment plan with them, they will send it to collections, and that collection will end up on your credit report. Again, as an indicator that you're not holding up your end of the deal, and these other places want to know about that. And the other one is the government. Now, the government's not necessarily going to pull your credit either, but they will report stuff like past due taxes. They'll also report stuff like a criminal record. Why that's important to your credit, I don't know, but it's listed there. So they'll post stuff, judgments against you and things like that on your credit report. And so that'll give an indicator. So imagine a company, you hired somebody to do some landscaping in your house and you didn't pay them. Well, that person can go to court and they can sue you. And when they sue you, they get a judgment against you, and that judgment will show up in your credit report as payment owed. So how this works, how lenders utilize this is pretty straightforward. So basically this lender, they want to lend out to as many people as you possibly can, but they're like, how do I do that? Now they can pull a credit report and they can go individually through each one of those credit reports, but that takes a lot of time. So there's a company that got pretty smart. It's a F.I.R.E Corporation, something along those lines. We'll put a link below, but basically a company came along and they said, hey, I got an idea. What I'll do is I'm going to go and I'm going to get all of this information that's on the credit report, and I'm going to come up with a scoring model, an ABCF kind of grade score. And you know what? I'll call that the FICO score. They're just going to name it after themselves. So it's not the credit report. You don't actually have a TransUnion score, Equifax, and Experian score. What you do is you have a different company that's going in, pulling the information that's contained on your credit report. They take that information, they go back and they put it into this little algorithm here, into their computer system, and they come up with a score. Then what happens is they take this score and they go to the banks and they say, hey, bank, I will sell you this particular score on this particular person so that you can determine if you want to approve them. So what happens ultimately is, you walk into the bank, this is you over here, right? So you go into the bank and you're like, hey, I want to get a loan. And the bank's like, okay, great. I'm in the business of getting loans and I want to give you money. You say you apply for a $10,000 loan. The bank, they don't go to TransUnion Equifax. They actually the bank goes over here to FICO or some intermediary. I won't get into the super details, but they go over here to this company and they go, hey, can you pull me the credit report on this individual and let me know what their scoring is? Then what they do is they take this and they go, okay, they go over here, they go to the credit report, they pull all the data, the raw data. Did you make your payments? What's your credit limits? What's all of that? They take that information, they go back, they plug it into their system, they get your credit score. Let's say your credit score ends up being a 680. They take that 680 and they sell it back to the bank. So it's all about money, folks, basically at the end of the day. The banks say, hey, we want to put all of our information in one centralized location. So this company holds this particular information about you. Then another company comes in and says, hey, we're going to take that information, we're going to put a scoring model behind it, and we're going to sell it to the banks. And that's why you can actually have different credit scores, because TransUnion, Equifax, and Experian, what happens is banks, it costs money to report and to have all those interactions. So a bank might say, listen, we're only going to report to Experian, or we're only going to report to Equifax, or we're going to report to all three. Kind of depends on the relationship that that bank has with the different credit bureaus. So if they're only reporting to one credit report, well, you only have the pay history on that one credit report. And that is why when this company goes and pulls your credit report, while your TransUnion score could be higher and your Equifax could be lower, because it has different data that's calculated. So this computer model doesn't care. They're just going to go in and they're just going to pull your credit report, what's on there, what's been reported, and they're going to look at it and they're going to give you that score. So hopefully that makes sense to you. Again, it's not critical, but it's important that when you go to a bank, it's not Equifax or Experian that's giving the credit scores. They're actually just collecting data. It's a third party. Now, when you go into the FICO, we'll cover this in another video, but the FICO is just one particular score. because money reigns, folks. What's happened over the past couple of years is there have been other scoring models. There's this thing called a Vantage score. And what a Vantage score is, the credit bureaus got together and they said, hey, wait a minute. This third-party company is taking our data and they're selling it to the banks. Maybe we can do that ourselves. So what they did is they came up with something called a Vantage score, and that scoring model is completely different, and it has different ranges of your score. And what they do is they have some relationships with some banks, and instead of the banks going to a company that pulls their information, sometimes the banks just go directly to Experian, and Experian gives them their own score. And they're giving them something called a Vantage score. So that could be slightly different. So depending on where you pull your score, it could be different. On some websites you can go to, if you went to like a LifeLock type company, you pull your score, and then you went to your Discover card versus what you get in Credit Karma versus what the bank pulls, it's all completely different. And that is all dependent upon what third party they're going to, and what is that third party, how do they calculate what's the score. They're all pretty similar for the most part. But they can be slightly different. The reason why that's important is because banks build their entire underwriting division based on their scoring model. So what the bank does is they say, hey, we know, again, we're going to approve people around a 680 credit score. But that 680, it's not necessarily the 680 across the board. It's the 680 credit score that they get from the company that they have a relationship with. So if a bank has a relationship with Experian, they might say, hey, we're going to only approve 700 and above on that scoring model. But if we get it from this place, we're going to do a 680 and above. Again, I know it gets really confusing, guys. But the reason why they do that is because they built their entire underwriting process. We'll get into the details of that based on that score. So when they pull that score at a 680, what that allows them to do is, like, anybody below 680, they can just flat out decline. Anybody above 680, that small sliver of people that they get the applications for, then they go individually through the different credit reports and they look at the meat sort of it to see what's there. So that's how the whole point of the credit scoring model, all that, is just basically to save the bank's time. Obviously, it makes a lot of people money. It's a little cahoots about everybody sort of gathering information about you to use it against you, if you will. But the idea is that instead of the banks having to go in and look at all 3 credit reports and get all of that data, which is a manual process, think if you got 1,000 applications a day, instead they could say, just give me the score. Okay, anybody with this score and above, we're going to look at only their credit reports in detail. The rest of them we're just going to set aside. And that's the reason why we have credit score, folks. Hopefully that made sense to you. Again, not critically important for you as far as building wealth, but I think it is important just sort of as your general knowledge of where scores. It might make you a little bit less frustrated when you see your scores all over the place. At the end of the day, guys, if you're doing the right things, if your credit utilization is right, if you're paying your payments on time, you're not taking out tons of debt, you're not getting tons of inquiries, you're keeping that nice mix of cards and credit cards and of car notes and mortgages, and you're keeping that nice mix, it doesn't really matter what your score is, because a 700, a 750, 800, it all ends up in the exact same thing. Look forward to the next video.